Imagine building one of the most strategically important shortcuts on Earth. Then imagine not owning it forever. For decades, the Panama Canal represented American engineering, American logistics, American strategic power. A narrow passage connecting two oceans and dramatically compressing global distance. But control over the canal was never simply a question of concrete or locks or ships. It was a question of sovereignty. Who has the right to operate it? Who has the right to defend it? Who guarantees access? Who decides the rules? And what happens when the country that built the infrastructure is no longer the country that controls it? The answer was not decided by a battlefield. It was negotiated through treaties. And those treaties created something extraordinary, a legal architecture where sovereignty, strategic access, economic infrastructure, and global neutrality were engineered into the same system. Before the Panama Canal, ships traveling between the Atlantic and Pacific faced a brutal geographic problem. They had to travel around the southern tip of South America, thousands of additional miles, longer voyages, more fuel, more risk, more time. The idea of cutting through Panama was not merely an engineering ambition, it was a transformation of global geography. A shortcut could change trade. A shortcut could change military logistics. A shortcut could change the strategic balance between oceans. And eventually, a shortcut could change the relationship between nations. When the canal opened, the distance between two oceans suddenly became dramatically smaller. But the infrastructure created a second question. If a waterway becomes essential to global commerce, can control over it remain permanently tied to one foreign power? That question would eventually reshape the entire legal architecture of the canal. The canal appears to be a physical shortcut, but its real power comes from the system surrounding it. Treaties determine sovereignty. Legal frameworks determine administration. Neutrality rules determine access. Infrastructure determines capacity. Geography determines strategic value. And global commerce turns all of it into leverage. The Panama Canal became a perfect example of a larger principle. Infrastructure does not exist in isolation. The physical structure is only one layer. Above it exists law. Above law exists power. And when those layers are carefully designed, a canal can become something far more important than a passage between two oceans. It can become a geopolitical operating system.
Before the canal became a global trade artery, it became a political bargain. The United States wanted a passage. Panama wanted sovereignty. The geography was valuable. The engineering was difficult. The strategic incentives were enormous. And whenever infrastructure becomes strategically important, construction is never the only challenge. The deeper question becomes, who controls the territory around it? Who controls the infrastructure? Who controls the security? And who controls the rules? The original legal arrangement gave the United States extraordinary authority over the canal zone. For Washington, the canal represented security, commercial access, and a strategic connection between two oceans. For Panama, the arrangement became a symbol of something different, a foreign power controlling a critical corridor inside Panamanian territory. The infrastructure was physical, but the conflict was fundamentally about sovereignty.
A canal can move ships, but it can also move power. The country that controls a major passage can influence military logistics, commercial routes,
energy flows, and strategic access between entire regions. That is why infrastructure often becomes political. The more essential the infrastructure becomes, the more sensitive foreign control becomes. For decades, the canal existed inside this tension. It was an American-built system operating inside Panama, serving the entire world. The arrangement created efficiency, but efficiency does not automatically create legitimacy. A system can function and still generate political pressure. Eventually, the question could no longer be avoided. Could a global waterway remain permanently associated with one foreign power while the nations surrounding it demanded greater control? The answer would require more than a political statement. It would require a new legal architecture.
In 1977, the architecture began to change. The Torrijos-Carter Treaties created a new framework for the canal. The old arrangement would not simply continue forever. Control would transition, sovereignty would be redefined, and the future of the canal would be governed by a different legal structure. This was not a simple handover. It was a carefully engineered transition. The canal would eventually come under Panamanian control, but global access would remain protected. The United States would retain important strategic rights under the treaty framework, and the canal would operate under a principle designed to reassure the world: neutrality. The challenge was extraordinary. How do you transfer control without destroying confidence? How do you restore sovereignty without closing access? How do you create a system where national ownership and international commerce can coexist? The answer was to separate control from access. On December 31st, 1999, the transition was completed. The Panama Canal became fully operated by Panama. A century of foreign administration had come to an end. But the story did not end with the transfer, because the canal had become too important to function as an ordinary national asset. Its users came from everywhere. Its cargo connected continents. Its economic importance extended far beyond Panama. So the legal architecture had to solve a difficult problem. How can a country exercise sovereignty while a global system depends on uninterrupted access? The answer was not to eliminate national control. It was to place national control inside an international framework. Panama would operate the canal, but the canal would remain open to international navigation. The physical infrastructure changed hands. The global function remained. Neutrality sounds passive. In reality, it can be extraordinarily powerful. A neutral infrastructure creates confidence. A shipping company can plan. A government can calculate. A financial institution can assess risk. A global supply chain can assume that access will remain available. The Panama Canal's neutrality framework exists to preserve that confidence. The canal is not simply a national waterway. It is a global passage, operating under a legal principle designed to maintain access. That distinction matters, because the value of the canal does not come only from the ships that pass through it. It comes from the expectation that ships will continue to pass through it. Every predictable passage creates economic value. Every credible neutrality guarantee reduces uncertainty. And in global commerce, reduced uncertainty becomes an invisible form of infrastructure. The Panama Canal reveals a deeper truth about infrastructure. The physical asset is only the beginning. A canal has locks, gates, water, engineering. But the system around it contains something far more complex: treaties, sovereignty, neutrality, access, security, commerce, and international expectations. Together,
These layers create a system greater than the infrastructure itself. That is why the most important infrastructure on Earth is rarely just physical. Its real power comes from the rules surrounding it. A port becomes strategic when trade depends on it. A pipeline becomes geopolitical when energy depends on it. A data center becomes powerful when digital services depend on it. And a canal becomes global power when the world cannot easily replace it.
The Panama Canal was never merely a passage. That was the visible layer. The deeper system was control. Who builds the infrastructure? Who owns the territory? Who administers the asset? Who guarantees access? Who defines neutrality? And who possesses the ability to influence what happens when the system is threatened? The canal's history demonstrates a powerful principle. Infrastructure does not create leverage by itself. Leverage emerges when physical geography, legal architecture, and global dependency intersect. The United States built extraordinary strategic value through engineering. Panama ultimately gained control through legal transformation. The world retained access through neutrality. 3 different interests were placed inside one system. That is the architecture. Not one country controlling everything, but different forms of power, separated, negotiated, and connected. Because the most sophisticated systems of power do not always eliminate competition. They design the rules under which competition can continue.
The Panama Canal changed hands, but global commerce did not stop. That is what makes its history so important. The physical infrastructure was built by one power. The territory belonged to another. The legal framework eventually created a new balance, and global trade continued to move. The lesson is larger than Panama. When critical infrastructure becomes too important, ownership alone is no longer enough to explain power. The real question becomes, who controls the rules? Who guarantees access? Who carries the responsibility? And who possesses the leverage when the system is placed under pressure? The canal survived a transformation and sovereignty because its architecture was redesigned, not destroyed, redesigned. And that is how the most important systems in the world often evolve. Power does not always disappear. Sometimes it changes form.
Today, we decoded the legal architecture behind one of the world's most important canals. Next time, we will examine another system where geography, law, and military power collide. Because the most important question is rarely, who owns the infrastructure? The deeper question is, who controls the conditions under which everyone else must use it? If you want to understand the hidden systems behind global power, trade, energy, technology, and wealth, subscribe to NEXERA, because the world is built on infrastructure, but power is built on architecture.
The world is often divided by borders, but civilization is connected by corridors. Some are physical, some are legal, some are financial, some are invisible. The most powerful systems combine all of them. They transform geography into access, access into dependency, dependency into leverage, and leverage into power. The Panama Canal is a reminder that the infrastructure we see is only one layer of the system. The deeper architecture is hidden inside the rules, the treaties, the incentives, and the dependencies that make the infrastructure indispensable. Because power is rarely found in the place where everyone is looking. It is often found inside the system everyone else depends on. This is NEXERA. We don't just explain what happens, we decode the architecture that makes it possible. Decoding systems, architecting wealth.